Where do you teach math, at the high school?
Yeah.
A teacher, an insurance broker.
No, he doesn't know me from Adam. But he has my daughter, so I'm going to be nice to him.
Customers of Shelley's Barber Shop one blustery afternoon in Aberdeen, Washington.
For goofing off?
Oh, yes.
Annalise?
Should call you the person.
To the folks who live here, Grays Harbor County is usually a comfortable corner of the world. But lately, there's been uncertainty over the future, an undercurrent of discontent.
Yeah, my dad's a lawyer.
Because all the way from Grays Harbor to Washington, D.C., people are weighing facts about a log export ban against promises. And the facts have them worried.
Because that put him out of work.
I think it would be disastrous.
An immediate ban of logs destroys the Grays Harbor economy.
Everybody's out for a quick fix.
In effect, in economic terms, we always say there is no free lunch, and there isn't in this case either.
I think the real problem is in the federal timber supply, and you have all kinds of elements looking around at what they consider the most vulnerable part of the forest products working circle, and that's log exports.
Here and throughout Washington state, people whose livelihoods depend on log exports have no choice but to face the issue head-on, day after day. Jobs, general economic health, the environment. These are the topics of discussion, the concerns that divide the community.
You can't help but be torn when you grew up with people who are mill owners and mill workers.
If we lose our jobs here, is it going to do any good if everybody moves back into Seattle?
I want to do what's best to leave my land for my son and the next generations beyond.
Third generation here, third generation longshoremen.
Glenn RAMISKEY is head of the Longshoremen's Union in Aberdeen. Out of all the issues, jobs, economy, environment, it is that of jobs that hits home on the waterfront. The concerns of Local 24 are shared by other longshoremen in 6 other rural ports, ports which handle 80% of the log exports statewide. Because 35% of the log volume through the Port of Grays Harbor is state timber, the people of Local 24 fear a ban on the export of state logs would cost them 50 jobs.
But behind that 50 are a very large number of other people in this community.
Behind every one of those jobs is an individual and a family.
From a log export ban, we would lose the jobs in the rural port communities, but we really don't gain that many other rural jobs.
What worries people most is the general economic health of Grays Harbor County, and in turn, Washington State. Cutbacks in logging, in trucking, in public services, in retail jobs. Because Grays Harbor has seen it all before. Times of timbered prosperity, times of market-driven depression. And even though the community still celebrates cork boots and crosscut saws, there's a sense that times are changing. And there's a fear that governmental dabbling in the marketplace may be a larger hindrance than help.
Just like there'll never be as many people working on the waterfront tomorrow as there were yesterday or today, there won't be as many people working any mill due to increases in productivity and technology. The promise of jobs to be created we see as a shallow promise.
And, you know, the easy answer is that if we don't export, then there'll just simply be more trees to run through the mills.
The difficulty with that argument is that it will be purchased on the open market by the most competitive mills, and in fact, new mills will have to be created close to some of this timber. So it doesn't really help most of the mills that are distant from this timber and the smaller, less competitive mills.
Diversity in this economy is something that this community has been trying to accomplish for a number of years.
We have not been very successful.
It has been poised as a simple argument. That is, if you simply keep the timber at home, we can create more processing jobs. And in fact, that is true. You will create more processing jobs. But the fact is, when you look at all the number of people who are paying for the subsidy to create those processing jobs, we would lose about 2,000 more jobs than we would gain.
To understand why, look at the direct, immediate losses. There'll be less money available to the state's Common School Construction Fund, fewer taxes flowing to Washington State's counties. And in Grays Harbor County, with its own timber resource, public services could lose $1 million a year.
And that $1 million would be distributed amongst hospital districts and fire districts and the county government and our road district and a variety of the small school districts of rural Grays Harbor County.
If that revenue were reduced to any extent, then someone is going to have to make up the difference.
When you look at what it's going to do to Grays Harbor, we need to be very selfish about it and ask it, what's in this for us? And no one's ever given me that answer. I'm convinced that if there was a ban on exports tomorrow, that we could put out of work 2,000 to 3,000 people in this community. Worse than that, I think it's a psychological blow to our community. Fear is a terrible thing in a community. Local people who do business here now quit investing, but sometimes the fear of our major economy being dislocated by decisions like this drives everybody else away.
That's tough. How do you plan?
Marvin Reiner is one who wants to do business in Grays Harbor. His dad founded a store in Aberdeen in 1920. Marvin took over in 1950, and by 1988, it was Marvin's son's turn.
Some people say we're dying. Well, we're not dying. There's still bright spots of our economy, and we hope to be agile enough or creative enough to create opportunities in the future as our parents did in the past.
One of the opportunities that Marvin's father created in the past was the ownership of timberland. Marvin and other tree growers across the state share immediate concerns about an export ban on state logs.
You throw all that extra wood onto a market, forcing down all scales of value down.
And I think that will tend to put a message out to people that it's really not worthwhile making a long-term investment in forestry.
It's a pebble dropped in the water. You can't tell what would come, but probably it would be a tremendous adjustment throughout the whole Northwest.
My biggest concern is that it'll evolve into a ban on all timber.
So they're very concerned that a ban on state log exports achieves nothing, and so the next target would be to put a ban on their exports.
Washington state timber growers agree that a ban on the export of state logs will have an immediate and negative effect on the market. First, it will force domestic prices down, making intensive forestry less cost-effective.
I think the immediate effect will be to reduce the price of logs, and if the level of return is very low, the investment has to be very low. Otherwise, it's not worth staying in the business. And the alternative is to get out of the business, to sell the land in small blocks and let it be developed.
The hard thing for people to understand is even if we were short timber, the last thing you would want to do would be to lower the price of timber, because it's the higher price of timber that would cause us to invest more in timber and grow more and be able to get more timber. This, in fact, is a subsidy to the processor, not to the timber grower.
What we're really talking about, I think, is at this point we have a federal subsidy in timber, and now they're asking for the state to subsidize timber sales.
All I'm saying is that when the government interferes with the marketplace, often the results aren't all that satisfactory.
Natural reprod, and that is wonderful.
In the final analysis, put statistical projections aside, meet Florence Free and her daughter Jean Bolton, third and fourth generation tree farmers. For them, as for others in Washington's rural timbered areas, government controls in the marketplace could mean an upset in the delicate balancing act that rules their survival. And although Florence and Jean grow timber, their sentiments are echoed by most anyone in Washington state who runs a business, works for a business, who has invested their future in this land and a way of life.
The whole trend says to me that we cannot do without the export market. The small tree farmer goes back to actually having to sell below what is his cost now. And in essence, subsidizing the mills, that's one part of it. The ramifications, as Mother said, are just horrendous for us. There's a great deal of our land we would not be able to hold on to for another generation without the export market.
That is my consideration, because I want it held on to for timber. Well, it's partly sentimental, partly that we've enjoyed it. Just the plain enjoyment of this is worth a lot.
I think so too.
I think so too. And it's part of our heritage. It's part of the Northwest heritage.